Hello and welcome to DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler and Minna Stein. How are you guys doing?
Good.
I'm well,
Ec-
thanks.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well let's kick it off. What do we have going today?
Japan and the US have reached a trade agreement lowering tariffs on Japanese auto imports to 15%, down from 27.5%, and reducing planned duties on other goods, setting a potential benchmark for future global trade deals. Economists say the 15% tariff level, while still elevated, is manageable and preferable to ongoing trade uncertainty. Financial markets responded positively, with major automakers' stocks surging and inflation expectations easing slightly, suggesting potential future Fed rate cuts. However, high tariff threats remain for the EU, China, and others, while critical deadlines looming in August could still escalate trade tensions if no agreements are reached.
This is Cuckoo. This is Cuckoo the response. We use say economists, not all economists. 15% is well above historical U.S. tariff rates. It is definitely inflationary. And if Trump had started off the year saying, I'm going to raise tariffs on everybody to 15%, people would be freaking out. But this is akin to the situation where, anti domestic violence experts cheer a spouse because he or she, you know, announces that he will or she will only beat their partner on Thursdays. It's like, oh, well, that's stability. This is not stability. This is the U.S. shaking down partner countries for no reason in inflationary ways that undermine the international trading system. Furthermore, as if that weren't bad enough, it's not a real deal. It's a framework. There's a lot of big, vague elements of it that need to be resolved because trade deals require a lot of detail work, and that hasn't been done yet. And as Riley pointed out, uh, big economies, including the EU and China, are taking a different approach. They recognize that when you capitulate to Trump, what you end up getting is more mistreatment. And so they're taking a tougher stance. Again, framework deals may be realized, but my guess is that big components of those framework deals will be pushed out into the future, which will allow Trump to declare victories today and these countries to um, uh, hope that somebody sane comes in and intervenes in the next couple of years to undo the incredible damage that Trump is doing to our economy and to the international trading system.
Attorney General Pam Bondi removed a judge's appointed U.S. attorney in New Jersey, escalating tensions between the Trump administration and the federal judiciary after judges replaced interim appointee Elena Haba, a Trump loyalist, with career prosecutor Desiree Grace. The conflict centers on judicial authority versus presidential appointment powers, with critics calling Haba unqualified and politically motivated, while the DOJ defends her actions and accuses judges of activism. The situation mirrors broader clashes over interim federal prosecutors nationwide, raising questions about the future leadership of key U.S. attorney offices.
This is not about judicial activism. This is not about a debate between presidential authority and judicial authority. This is about breaking the law because the law is absolutely clear. The president gets to appoint interim people in these jobs if there is nobody that he nominated and his Senate confirmed. They can serve for up to 120 days. At the end of 120 days, the district courts, just judges for the district in question, get to determine whether the person who held the job continues in the job or not. And if they choose that it not be that person, then they get to appoint the interim person to be the prosecutor for that region until somebody is Senate confirmed. That's the law. They were following the law, these judges appointed by many different presidents. What is happening is that the President of the United States and his Attorney General are making the argument that the President gets to do whatever he wants, and what the President chooses to do is the law, regardless of how statutes or the Constitution may be written. This is another blow against the rule of law in the United States. It is appalling. It should not be described in terms of some kind of political debate or tug of war. It should be called out for the criminal behavior that it is. Let's be clear. The president takes an oath to uphold the Constitution and preserve, protect, and defend the United States and the laws of the United States. If he does not do that, he's violating his oath. It's an impeachable offense, just as each and every day Donald Trump commits impeachable offenses. Let's see this for what it is and call it for what it is, and not dress it up into a political argument, as the Attorney General is trying to do to provide cover for the crime she's committing.
The UN's International Court of Justice is issuing a landmark advisory opinion on climate change, prompted by lobbying from vulnerable island nations like Vanuatu that could influence global legal standards for environmental protection. The court is addressing what international legal obligations countries have to curb greenhouse gas emissions and the consequences of failing to act. While the opinion is non-binding, it could serve as a foundation for future legal actions, including domestic lawsuits and international accountability. This marks another legal milestone for climate-vulnerable states, following similar rulings by other international courts recognizing environmental protection as a legal and human rights obligation.
You know, it's important to remember here that if you're an island nation, or if you live on a country with a lot of low-lying coastland, the debate about climate is not an academic exercise. It's not a political exercise. And one can ill afford to take the anti-science position embraced by the Trump administration and the petroleum industry, right? Because if sea levels rise, these places die. If sea levels rise and storms take place, these are the ones that are hardest hit. Lives are lost, economies are destroyed, and countries will be destroyed. So it's good to see this kind of action. It will inevitably produce a response from the United States, which is antithetical to the interests of all of us as citizens of a shared planet. But, you know, political correctness, ironically enough, is really what this administration's multilateral organization policies are about. There's another example of this. The United States withdrew from UNESCO, the Educational and Cultural Agency of the United Nations, again this week, because of its allegedly woke policies. And what does this do? It gets the United States out of critical discussions about shared interests on issues like culture, like education, like the intellectual development of the planet. And it gives other countries, like the Chinese, see the New York Times article on the front page today about this, much more influence. It's appalling. Mike Waltz, who has just made our ambassador to the United Nations, says he wants to make the UN great again. That's a lie. It's another one of those tell them the opposite of what you're actually going to do kind of lies that we get from these people. One by one, this administration is going to go after UN agencies, pull out weaken them, defund them, and seek to withdraw, because the real foreign policy of this administration is a gated community foreign policy where the United States builds big walls, hires an army to police those walls, gets involved only when friends who are paying off the president ask him to get involved, and otherwise stays out of global affairs. It's short-sighted, it's irresponsible, and ultimately it's dangerous for the United States.
The House GOP abruptly ended its final work week before summer recess due to internal conflict over the push to release all remaining government files related to Jeffrey Epstein. A standoff in Rules Committee, driven by pressure from conservative members and public demand for transparency, stalled legislative action and forced Speaker Mike Johnson to move up the final vote to Wednesday. Tensions escalated as Representative Thomas Macy, working with Democrats, advanced a bipartisan effort to compel document release, drawing sharp criticism from Johnson, who accused him of political sabotage.
I think he pronounces his name Massey, and he is a complete nut job. But on a couple of these issues, he's been willing to take an independent path from the rest of the GOP. This is real weakness on the part of the GOP leadership. It is Mike Johnson capitulating to Trump. They hope they're going to figure out a way to change the subject between now and a month from now when the Congress comes back. They hope that something else will supplant this. And certainly, Lord knows, Trump is trying to put other issues up there. Yesterday, he accused Barack Obama of treason. Which just goes to the, how the depths that he will sink. By the way, his treasonous crime was undertaking to protect U.S. elections from Russian interference that every single one of the United States intelligence agencies said was actually taking place. Every single one of them. It's like they're pretending that climate change is not a real thing. They're just trying to deny it for political purposes. But I don't know that this particular tactic with regard to sort of shutting down the House and, getting out of Dodge is actually going to work, because so many people who are on the MAGA side of things want to see what's in the Epstein files. These people will not be misled by this whole charade of releasing grand jury minutes, because the reality is, first of all, a judge may not allow that to happen. But secondly, there's nothing new in the grand jury minutes. What you really want to see is the evidence. There are tens, hundreds of thousands, perhaps a million pages of evidence that people want to see. And I just don't think these tactics are going to make this go away. I don't know what these MAGA folks expected, by the way, of Trump, with all the pictures of Epstein, with all the examples of Trump hanging out with him that we knew long ago. I don't know what they thought was going to happen if they dug into this. But they're not going to stop until they do. And the cover-ups so far have not worked. I think it's going to continue. One last point, though. Who do you think has access to this information? Who do you think knows things about Epstein that are not in the public domain? The FBI? Justice Department? Yeah, for sure. What about Russian intelligence? What about Israeli intelligence? What about other big intelligence agencies around the world? Trust me, they were all following Epstein and the people he was hanging out with and the sleazy things he was doing, and Trump and the other big establishment figures in the United States that were involved in sex trafficking and outrageous behavior, because they collect this stuff, because it gives them leverage. And I think we're seeing some of the leverage that it gives them over the course of this Trump presidency. Anyway, rest assured, what you don't know, about the Epstein files, somebody in the Mossad knows. Somebody in the SVR in Russia knows. People in Chinese intelligence know. And they'll use that information, whether it ends up becoming public here or not.
Russian and Ukrainian officials are meeting in Istanbul for rare peace talks, though both sides remain far apart in their demands, making any breakthrough unlikely. Ukraine insists on a full ceasefire before negotiating a peace deal, while Russia demands peace terms first, including recognition of annexed territories and limits on Ukraine's military. The talks are partly driven by pressure from U.S. President Trump, who has made ending the war a key foreign policy goal and threatened new sanctions if no deal is reached by September. While hopes for major progress are low, discussions may yield smaller agreements on issues like prisoner exchanges and the return of Ukrainian children taken to Russia.
Yeah, there'll be no agreement here. And the deadline that Trump posted will not be a lasting deadline. They may agree on a exchange, prisoner exchange or something like that. And that'll give Trump the excuse at the end of his 50-day extension to extend it again. And the Russians will keep fighting to gain advantage. And the United States will drag its feet in providing support for Ukraine, thus slowly weakening Ukraine, putting more burden on our European allies to support Ukraine, and strengthening Russia. Because, and I know Donald Trump tends to say that people who bring this up are committing treason or lying or involved in a hoax. The reality is that Donald Trump has been doing Russia's bidding since 2015, probably long before that, throughout his first term in office, and is doing it again right here, regardless of his expressions of unhappiness with Vladimir Putin. If he was really unhappy with Vladimir Putin, he would impose real sanctions. He would move to get money that was Russian money given to the Ukrainians. He would not impede the flow of weapons to the Ukrainians. He would give them more weapons. He would enable them to gain more ground because it's the right thing to do, and because the only way you will actually bring the Russians to the table is if they start to lose and they realize that their negotiating position is getting weaker. But he's not doing any of that. The reason is that he's not really interested in an equitable solution here. He's trying to get this done so that he can get some credit for it, not just with the world community, but with Vladimir Putin. He wants to get the Putin settlement approved, where Russia gets to keep land it stole, Russia gets to impose limitations on what Ukraine as a sovereign nation can do, whether it's how they build up their military, or how they're involved with the EU, or how they can fortify their own borders. All of these are things that Russia wants to control. And, Donald Trump is, his errand boy. Always has been, always will be. Well, here we are, in the middle of a week in the summertime. And that's all the news that we've got. But you know what else we have today? We've got a great episode of Silicon Consciousness that we did yesterday, talking about a rising power in AI you should listen to. We've got an upcoming episode of Deep State Radio with our regulars later today, in which we'll talk about some of the issues we've just talked about here. We've got a great episode of Need to Know, which we're looking at some recent new insights into how things are going at the CIA from a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of a new book about the CIA. And I remind you that Need to Know is available to our members when it comes out. If you're not a member, you have to wait a week for it. Some of what we talk about there may not be quite as fresh. Just like if you're not a member, you're missing out on about a third of the content in most of our podcasts. So, you know what? I think it would be a good thing to do right now that you haven't done, but you could do right now. Go become a member. go to the dsrnetwork.com, click on membership, sign up. It's only a few bucks a month. It really, really, really helps us and will help us provide the kind of honesty and expert perspectives on the news that is so important in times like these. So go do that. And then come back because we've got so much more for you. Until then, bye-bye.